Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Baron and this is your Brain on Books. And today I want to talk about Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. I just finished this book a couple weeks ago. I really wanted to jump on front of the camera and talk about it kind of right away, but I realized I was just going to kind of rip the book apart and I wanted to take maybe a week or two to kind of let it digest, really try to understand the authorial intent behind this before I kind of voiced my opinion. Now, one of the reasons I started this channel was to kind of talk about the books I read going forward and how I feel about them, whether it be good, bad, and different. And another big component is to kind of just have discussions with people who have read this stuff and, you know, give me your insight, give me your thoughts. I want to know. This book has kind of a huge swath of different opinions. You know, I've seen reviews, people talk about this, and they just refer to it as a masterpiece, Murakami's greatest work, just total gush. And then on the other hand, I've seen people just say it is complete hot garbage. Now, I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. I think that there's some kind of cool ideas that were presented here by Murakami. However, a lot of it just kind of fell flat on its face, and I don't think he quite stuck the landing. But before we go into kind of what he did good and what he did bad, let's just talk about what this book actually is. So when I first picked this up, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, I thought it was just kind of an absurdly long title for a novel. What I was not aware of was that this was actually split as two kind of novellas running in parallel, one being Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the other one being End of the World. Now, of course, you can imagine there's going to be some type of connection between the two at some point. I didn't find the connection to be too difficult to make. I think any reasonable, intelligent reader can kind of figure it out within a few chapters, at least a rough idea of how this might come together. And then one of my issues with the book is Murakami kind of played his hand like 3/4 through. And, you know, you're waiting for this big kind of gut punch twist on how this is all going to come together. You have two separate mysteries and then this overarching mystery. And he just gives you the info like pretty quick. And, you know, it makes continuing the rest of the book kind of a chore. And I think most people would have that feeling. You know, if there was some really deep thematic things that are worth exploring once you get past just the basic narrative structure and you really just want to get in the minutia of the world, then it's fine continuing. But the last 25% of this book, it took me it was like 120 pages, and I swear it took me like 4 days. Like I just couldn't get through it. But eventually finished the book, and here we are. So let's talk about what each one of these stories are. And we'll start with Hard-Boiled Wonderland. Now, no one is really named in this book. You know, it's just kind of I, the librarian, the professor, the this, that, or whatever. There's no named characters and very few named places. Now, our character, just known as I, has something that's been done to him, what is called shuffling. So this is kind of a genetic modification, if you will, that allows him to encrypt and encode data in between the right and left side of his brain. Cool idea, right? And as you can kind of get the sense right away that this particular story is absolutely science fiction. I've heard this categorized as like literary surrealist kind of work, magical realism. You can call it whatever you want. To me, this is hard sci-fi through and through. I haven't seen anything presented that kind of deviates from that classification, if you will. So what is he actually doing with this information? Well, he gets linked up with this professor scientist guy that has this underground kind of Dr. Evil layer where he's running some classified scientific experiments. And there's some people that are kind of after him, hoping to acquire his stuff. He gets lost underground, and him, basically our main character, and this professor's granddaughter, 17-year-old granddaughter, have to kind of go on a quest to rescue him. And you're also seeing this kind of interaction between this guy and the world. He has some issues with alcoholism, and there's this really strange, cringy, kind of like sexualized nature to him and how he interacts with women, which I've heard complaints about that with Murakami before. I haven't experienced it up to this point. Usually not something that typically bothers me in a novel, but this was kind of hard to ignore. It was a little bizarre. I'll just leave it at that and let you decide for yourself. So anyway, that particular story, pretty straightforward overall. There were some cool components to it. It is a mystery, almost tries to adopt some kind of thriller elements, but I never really felt overly invested into this character's story. I didn't really care to see what happened to him, which is a shame because, this is a huge component. It's half of the book, right? So when half of the book just doesn't hit with you, you're going to struggle through the whole thing. And that was my personal experience. Now, on the other hand, you have End of the World, which is the other story. Now, this one I thought was pretty interesting. Now, this is almost like a Kafka-esque castle kind of story to where you have a character who is in this walled off utopian community that is, as far as he's concerned, anyone else in town, the only town in existence. Now, when he goes there, anyone goes there, they're separated from their shadow, and their shadow actually holds all their memories, and the shadow is set aside until it dies. And once your shadow dies, you are basically trapped in this place forever. And each particular person is assigned a role in the community, and our main character is what's called a dream reader. Now, as soon as I saw the setup for this, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. This is some unique stuff. I can't wait to continue and see what happens to our character. And I certainly loved this story way more than the first one. But once again, I didn't feel overly invested, and I didn't feel like it went kind of anywhere. So I'll just leave it as that. And let's just kind of talk about what he actually does good in this book. Now, the first thing is he introduces some pretty cool paradoxes that we're familiar with in our own world, one of which being the Archer's paradox, and kind of explores them. It's a bit ambitious to try to put it in a literary work. How are you going to tie that into this like almost sci-fi feeling story? Well, it was ambitious. It was cool. I don't think it really had this huge impact. It didn't really leave me with too much thought. But once I closed the page, I don't know how to define it. Like I just moved on with my life after I finished it and didn't have this big revelation that I feel like he was trying to present to the reader. And I felt that kind of across the board. Now I know I'm being negative off something that he did, what I said was doing well, but despite how I think it ended, it was still ambitious. It was still a cool idea, and I respect him for trying it. He also did the same thing with one concept of this book that I thought was just absolutely incredible, is he explores the subconscious, because like pretty much the overarching theme of this book is consciousness, but he basically subdivides your subconscious into like smaller components, right? So it's like relative to your time. So you can have like these infinite loops and infinite realities within your own subconscious, depending on how much you subdivide it. And that was awesome. I was really loving reading about that. I thought, once again, crazy ambitious, very innovative stuff. There might be other things like that out there. I haven't read anything like it. So I've quite enjoyed that. But once again, it kind of just didn't go anywhere. And that's just kind of my general impression of the entire novel, is really cool ideas, really cool settings, and just nothing happens that's really worthwhile, which is okay. Sometimes you read literary works and that's okay. You can just have people just existing, and you can watch their day to day, because what you're really trying to read isn't so much a story. You're trying to read the authorial intent. And I don't really think that there was anything too impactful or that I'm going to remember from this story. A year from now, I'm going to forget every single detail of what I read, because it just wasn't that great. I ended up rating this 2 out of 5 stars. Maybe that's a little harsh, but that was my particular experience. And like I mentioned before, people have there's a pretty wide range of how this novel resonates with people. It didn't deter me from continuing with some other Murakami. Like I said, he did present some kind of cool ideas. I do want to pick up Kafka on the Shore. I do want to try Wind Up Bird Chronicles. I know those are pretty well-loved books of his, and we'll see how those go. Maybe they're a better fit. This might just be an outlier. So anyway, that's my general thought on this read. If you've picked this up before, you plan to in the future, please let me know what you think. This is a book I really think could have some good almost like book club style discussions. Whether you like it or not, there's still some decent amount to unpack here. So yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks for hanging out if you stuck to the end here, and I'll see you next time.